Hello everyone, I'm here in Turkey and technically I'm no longer in Europe. So once you cross the Bosphorus Strait in Istanbul and head east or south like I have done here in Izmir, you are in Asia Minor. But there's nothing minor about this. In fact, that's pretty major. That's big boy stuff. And this is Mustafa Ataturk. He was the founding father of the Republic of Turkey and served as the first president from 1923 until 1934 when he passed away. So you've got to be quite revered to have a monument like that carved into stone. But I have 2 weeks left here in Turkey until I come home. You know, all good things must come to an end, so we'll try have some fun, see a few more sights, and yeah, make the most of it. So I landed in Istanbul, no problems, all the worrying was for nothing. Took a bus, maybe 7-8 hours to Izmir, where I'm staying currently, and we're here in Ephesus, which is an old, ancient city dating back to the 10th century BC, and what I'm standing on here is an old artery that ran straight to the sea, a main road into Ephesus that ran to the sea. And of course you're greeted by an amazing theatre. I didn't get a hell of a lot of footage in Istanbul. I was feeling a little bit down, and it's just bloody crowded. So I've got a few clips, but not a hell of a lot from Istanbul. But today, hopefully, we can get a bit more footage of Ephesus. I'm sure if you Google Ephesus, the #1 photo that would come up would be the Library of Celsus. It was commissioned in the 2nd century and completed by none other than Hadrian, of course. It was one of the largest libraries in the Roman Empire, in fact the 3rd largest behind the infamous Alexandria, and held well over 10,000 scrolls. Such a beautiful building. Of course, like many other libraries, it succumbed to disaster, being totally wrecked in the 10th, 11th century by an earthquake. So we'll get some more B-roll of it. What an amazing building to be standing in front of. And what we're looking at here is the Temple of Hadrian. And if you've watched any of my other videos, I've mentioned Hadrian a bit, Hadrian this, Hadrian that, but it wasn't Hadrian who expanded the empire the most was actually Trajan. But after Trajan's death, Hadrian inherited a lot of what was expanded and actually consolidated the power to the best of his abilities. So it seems like everything's mentioned after Hadrian. There was a Hadrian's Gate in Greece, for example, but he didn't really do all the legwork. What I'm walking towards here would have been a rather sizable stoa, and a stoa is more or less a covered walkway, this one leading into a theatre. You can see the fluted columns with its Ionic and Corinthian capitals. And the favourite thing about stoa for me is kind of getting a sense of how large these would have been. You can see a massive walkway either side, and of course terraced 2 stories leading in to this theatre. So like I mentioned before, I didn't spend a hell of a lot of time in Istanbul, didn't get a lot of footage, a bit suffocating maybe, a bit claustrophobic, perhaps too big for little old Morgan I think, but I'll leave you with a story. I tried to visit the Blue Mosque twice and got stopped by guys saying it's closed, in the meantime come to my bazaar. So the first time I entertained it, went to this guy's bazaar, ended up buying a little vial of perfume, thinking it wouldn't be that expensive. He was a nice fella, and if you know anything about me, not great with maths. 3,000 lira, 120 New Zealand dollars. My brain wasn't computing that at the time, and I got royally scammed or ripped off. It happens, but that's not the most interesting story that came out of it. He shuffled me over to his uncle's carpet place. He was a nice fella. He was older. He said he lived in New Zealand for 7 years in the 1970s. This old Turkish guy. Interesting. He was living in Gore, of all places, deep down south. He said he was working for UNICEF, integrating Māori children into schooling. Okay. He seemed to know a lot about New Zealand, saying, he went to Dunedin to watch the rugby, 3 hours to Dunedin, 3 hours back to Gore. I don't think it takes 3 hours, but he's an old fella, he could be misremembering, fair enough. But it got me wondering, UNICEF in New Zealand in the 1970s? It just doesn't sound right. So I did a little bit of Googling afterwards, and I couldn't find any evidence of UNICEF, missions or workings in New Zealand. We're an OECD country, we're a first world country. I don't think UNICEF would be working in New Zealand. I couldn't find any programs to suggest that in the 1970s UNICEF was integrating Māori children into schooling. So it got me wondering, did he just make all of that up? It was such a detailed story that it was very believable, but it'd be psychotic to make up that story just, to sell some rugs to a Kiwi guy. Has he got that story locked down in his brain for any time a Kiwi comes into his shop? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but everything that I've searched up suggests that doesn't make any sense, and that was a complete and utter lie, which is psychotic behaviour. Very strange. I don't know. Let me know what you think, maybe. Am I weird for being skeptical? Seems very sure about himself, but UNICEF working in New Zealand, a developed country, I don't know about that.